videos for people who are not happy with the drug and talk therapy approach for psychiatric disorders and want treatment that actually restores a person's mental health instead of just suppressing the symptoms with synthetic drugs. If you're already taking psychoactive drugs and you're satisfied with how they work, I'm not here to try to talk you into making any kind of change. It's obviously a good thing that you have what you need. But there are tens of millions of other people worldwide who have not found these synthetic drugs to work well, and they deserve to have something that works for them. Suppressing symptoms with drugs cures no one. It's just an approach that brings in billions of dollars to those at the helm of the system. When my loved ones needed help, I used the orthomolecular approach, which I'll be reporting on in my next 2 videos. I'm not a doctor and I don't give medical advice. I'm a mother, a grandmother, a former high school teacher, and now an investigative reporter. I've spent over 20 years investigating why the drug approach is so ineffective, as well as researching the orthomolecular approach and using it on my family members. My so-called incurably psychotic relative is 100% free of psych drugs because his mental health was restored. He works, pays taxes, has returned to college, and simply leads a good life. So, incurably mentally ill? Baloney. Tens of thousands of us in at least 40 countries know there's a wonderful way to restore a person's mental health, and I want everyone to know what we know. I think we need to stop and analyze the drug approach and how it's used in the United States, because then it's much easier to see how and why orthomolecular treatment is so sensible, safe, and effective. There's a secret we all need to know about the drug approach. It was never designed to cure anyone. Just suppress patients' symptoms with chemical straitjackets until they die. It's the perfect system for bringing in the highest possible profits. I wanted real recovery for my loved ones, and I'm sure you do too. I'm certain many of you watching this video have been through hell because you've been forced to not just deal with having someone you love become mentally ill, but also the never-ending visits to psychiatrists and pharmacies to get the drugs you've been talked into buying. And if your experience has been anything like my family's, you're also dealing with ambulances, emergency rooms, psych hospitals, police, attorneys, judges, judgmental people, and maybe even jail or prison. Not to mention the thousands of dollars the illness has cost you. I know there seems to be no end to all the heartbreak and chaos that go along with a mental disorder. After many years of taking 2 of my family members for conventional psychiatric help, it finally dawned on me that all the talking and synthetic drugs were always about the symptoms and never about the biological cause. It finally dawned on me that we were just being strung along year after year and that I smelled a rat. Things simply were not adding up. Conventional drugs and talk therapy were never going to cure my loved ones, so I decided to dump the phony drug approach and find my own way. Remember though, if you're a danger to yourself or others, you have no choice right now but to follow your doctor's advice and take whatever drugs you have been prescribed. Everyone else does have a choice. No matter where you live in the United States, if you develop a psychiatric problem, you'll be treated with the same 3-part approach as everyone else, which means you'll get a diagnosis, talk therapy, and synthetic drugs. There's a small percentage of people who are also given electroconvulsant therapy, or ECT, also called shock treatment, but my comments are confined to the 3 parts everyone is treated with. This 3-part approach is the only type of care allowed by DSHS and conventional psychiatrists, and it's only palliative, meaning that it just suppresses symptoms. So if you want your mental health restored so you can be free of psychiatric care, this type of care is not going to do that. In my opinion, it is this palliative approach that is responsible for our current epidemic of mental illness in the United States, and I believe it is the cause for so many millions of lives being destroyed. The mass shooters who murdered children and adults at Sandy Hook Elementary School, at the theater in Aurora, Colorado, in Las Vegas, Virginia Tech, and elsewhere, were all treated with the same kind of lousy, merely palliative care. We can do a whole lot better. So let's take a closer look at the three parts: the diagnosis, talk therapy, and synthetic drugs. A psychiatric diagnosis is only a description of the symptoms. It's just a label. Anyone who has experience with conventional psychiatry knows that if someone suffers from sudden rage, his diagnosis is typically sudden rage disorder. If someone is depressed, his diagnosis is typically depression. But that's like having a broken leg and being diagnosed with walks funny disorder. Or if you have pneumonia, being diagnosed with coughs a lot disorder. These two would be just using a description of the symptoms as so-called diagnoses. If the American Psychiatric Association can come up with a new name for a set of symptoms, then drug companies can develop a synthetic chemical to suppress those symptoms. That's how the system works. That's where recent diagnoses like bipolar disorder, ADHD, and schizo-affective disorder came from. These labels are made up to sell more psychiatric goods and services, namely drugs and talk therapy. Mind you, I know the symptoms are real, but what matters is the biological cause of those symptoms, and that particular subject is strictly taboo in American psychiatry. But if we don't know what's causing a problem, we're never going to fix it. Part 2 of the three-part approach is talk therapy, so you can talk about your symptoms for the rest of your life. And sessions aren't exactly cheap either, whether you're paying for them yourself or DSHS pays for them with our tax dollars. And Part 3 is where you're talked into buying patented, man-made chemicals to just keep a lid on your symptoms. Even in a best-case scenario, these drugs are still nothing more than a chemical straitjacket. If someone quits taking these chemicals, the symptoms typically return, often worse than before beginning treatment. So, are patients ever given a choice? No. It's drugs or nothing. Psychiatrists often prescribe a high dose of lithium, which can do serious harm to a person's kidneys, and they prescribe antipsychotics known to cause harm to a person's liver. These drugs make a mockery out of the oath that doctors take to first do no harm. I'm so glad my family was able to escape from such ridiculously bad mental health care. So, here again is America's conventional drug and talk therapy approach in a nutshell. I think we're all so used to this failed attempt at mental health care that we don't stop to consider if it could be any different. Conventional psychiatry is exactly the type of situation my mother warned me about. If a problem seems unsolvable, it's usually because someone is making a whole lot of money from keeping the problem going. She used to tell me I'd better start using my head for something besides a hat rack and stop depending upon others to do my thinking for me. And as usual, she was right. I want to be clear though, I'm not talking about people who just need someone to talk over a problem with. I think it's good to have someone to talk to. But if the issue is really an underlying physical problem, talk therapy has never and will never correct it. If you'd like to know just how ineffective the drug and talk therapy approach really is, please take a look at this report from alternativementalhealth.com/King County. In October of 2000, the King County Council, which includes the Seattle area, passed ordinance number 13974, the purpose of which was to improve the recovery rate for mentally ill DSHS clients. In 2002, 9,302 such patients were treated with the usual psych drugs. You can see on the very last line that 5 people recovered, ending in a recovery rate of 0.0005%. I would argue that most Americans, myself included when I was young, believe this terribly low recovery rate only proves mental illnesses are incurable, when in fact they are curable, and many have been for over 80 years. It's the synthetic drugs that are the real problem, and yet, as I said, patients are not given a choice. It's drugs or nothing. So don't believe any psychiatrist who claims that conventional psychiatry is around 65% effective. That's a phony statistic pulled out of thin air. The accurate number is, again, 0.0005%. And this statistic is the result of a third-party government audit. This is a graphic I found online, which, I believe, says it all. The system was never broken. It was built this way. The Secrets to Real Mental Health is the book I wrote about my family's experiences with mental illness and America's failed attempt at mental health care. The second half is the layperson's guide to using the orthomolecular approach to restore one's mental health. There should be a link below to purchase a copy, or you can always buy one from Amazon.com. Please note that the M.Ed. credentials after my name stand for a Master of Education degree. It is not a medical degree. I educate and I report, but I don't treat anyone and I don't give medical advice. I want everyone to know what I know about restoring mental health. And being an investigative reporter who has spent over 20 years researching this topic, I have a lot to report on. One of the reasons I was able to bring real recovery to my loved ones was that I decided that just because the psychiatrists were ignorant about finding and correcting the biological causes didn't mean I had to be. And I hope you will adopt the same attitude. A fundamental change in the practice of psychiatry is long overdue in the United States. We must start putting people before profits. So that's the end of this video. I hope you found it helpful, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.